There's a vast market out there. Look at the options out there in the marketplace. There's 1,000,001 different products out there in the market, and you could relate this to the knowledge problem that socialism is faced with, where the central planners are faced with an eyesore of trying to work out the millions of different options of different clothes. Take clothing, for example. There's all the different types of material.
Most commonly, your cheaper shirts are going to be made out of polyester, which is a synthetic of cotton. The bad thing about polyester is it's going to wrinkle and not hold up, and it's not going to breathe as well as cotton will. So your higher quality dress shirts are going to be made of 100% cotton. Sometimes you will get a cotton and polyester blend. That would be a little bit more in the mid-range. But you want to try to stick to 100% cotton shirts in a 2-ply construction.
There's all the different styles. There's all the different colours. You have to calculate how much to produce of every single colour.
I really like these too. I'm not really into purple, but recently I realized how little I have in my closet that's purple, and I want to get a lot more.
The central planners have got no way of knowing that. They can't know it. It's impossible for them to know it. They don't know it because they've just destroyed the information of what consumer demand is telling the market. And what's that consumer demand? Profits and losses. You destroy that information, you're screwed. Because it was consumers that drove that profits and losses. Never mind the incentive argument in terms of you need incentives for people to work. Forget that for a second. If you don't have profits and losses, how do you know where to allocate the scarce natural resources such as wood to the correct parts of the market? You've got 1,000,001 different products out there on the market that are wooden. Maybe it's wooden chairs, but then not all chairs are the same. You've got chairs that are all different styles. Then you've got the different type of wood.
I'm going to do another video about building the chairs, except this time I'm going to make it from oak.
You see the problem. A good example was actually given by Thomas Sowell with regards to prices in his book Basic Economics. You have yogurt, you have ice cream, and you have butter. All three of them require that of milk. Maybe it's during the year. Again, during a specific time of the year, you might have a higher demand for ice cream. Consumer demand naturally tells the market what is more in demand of. Why? Because when consumer demand drives up in an area of, say, they're buying ice cream, during a hotter period of the year, the price of ice cream drives up. So what did I say about consumer, behavioural pattern and of course producers' incentives? Well, the producer then knows, okay, here from the price signal that we can see, here's what's in demand. Therefore, we know from this price demand, this is what we're going to produce more of to bring the price down. And of course, most importantly, this is where milk is best allocated to. It's best allocated to the ice cream because that's what people are in demand of. What's the point? Allocating milk to a product that's not selling, that's not being sold, such as, for example, wasting that valuable scarce resource of milk and allocating it to yogurt that people are not buying. Do you see the point that I'm making now? That's why prices are so important. That's why profits and losses are so important. You cannot operate an economy without it. You are screwed without it. When you look at the whole argument by Kommari Kettu,
Economic Calculation Part 2.
Socialism assumes that all the available knowledge can be used by a single central authority.
Yes, that's exactly how we want things to be done. Like, first we have this one guy, or this small group at most, and they decide literally everything in the economy, especially the consumer sector. Do not forget the consumer sector. It is clearly the job of a central planner to figure out, I don't know, how much this locality, I mean how much this individual should eat apples, like right now.
I couldn't even make heads or tails out of his argument. The other guy had given an example that actually came from a real-world scenario. Is a reasonable argument.
Suppose you are the commissar of railroads in the old Soviet Union. Markets and prices have been banished. You and your comrades, passionate communists all, now directly plan how to use available resources. You want a railroad from city A to city B. But between the cities is a mountain range. Suppose somehow you know that the railroad, once built, will serve the nation equally well whether it goes through the mountains or around. If you build through the mountains, you'll use much less steel for the tracks because that route is shorter. But you'll use a great deal of engineering to design the trestles and tunnels needed to cross the rough terrain. That matters because engineering is also needed to design irrigation systems, mines, harbor installations, and other structures. And you don't want to tie up engineering on your railroad if it would be more valuable designing those other structures instead. You can save engineering for other projects if you build around the mountains on level ground. But that way you'll use much more steel rail to go the longer distance. And steel is also needed for other purposes, for vehicles, girders, ships, pots and pans, and thousands of other things. Which route should you choose for the good of the nation? To answer, you would need to determine which bundle of resources is less urgently needed for other purposes. The large amount of engineering and small amount of steel for the route through the mountains, or the small amount of engineering and large amount of steel for the roundabout route.
There's that thing again, it's economic efficiency, just like I argued in response to ContraPoints. It's all about economic efficiency. Why then would you choose, like Kommari Kettu's argument about building a railroad just around the mountain and completely ignoring how much resources you're using? In his scenario, he's making it sound as if resources are just something infinite that you can just ignore and just, turn a blind eye to, and who cares about, prices? He doesn't understand that there's a massive market out there where that steel could be better used. Maybe there's a higher demand elsewhere in the market for, certain given things, maybe for building ships or whatnot. You need to know where the market is in demand. Just like I said about that of wood resource. Since you've got an abundance of other products out there in the market, you're going to need to efficiently work out how much you're going to use of this resource. You can't just abuse it like it's no tomorrow and just throw it out there for the sake of it. This doesn't just apply to Marxists, as I say, this applies to Keynesians. This is why Keynesians have been so wasteful. Keynesians just think it's a case of, ignoring consumer demand and somehow creating aggregate supply in large quantity and just throwing it out there, and then they create demand. That's just, it's not how it operates. It's consumer demand that drives profits and losses that enables us to efficiently know all of this information.
Let's say you want to produce an automobile. The planner wants to produce an automobile. It's a production function for an automobile. And he has all the information. Now, there are many different ways to produce automobiles. Okay? You can use a lot of labor, as was the case prior to the mass production of automobiles in the United States, before 1914. You'd have 6 or 7 craftsmen in a small blacksmith shop. You'd have a very small area. And they would produce all the parts themselves and then assemble the automobile, and then sell it. Okay? So you had a lot of labor and few machines. After Henry Ford introduced the model of the meatpacking industry, which had a moving production line, when he introduced the assembly line in 1914, all of that changed. Okay? You had a lot of equipment, you had a huge factory, a lot of machinery compared to labor. So there are many different ways in between to produce automobiles. There's a Kia plant that's 20 miles from here. There's like 3 cars in the parking lot, even though it's, plant goes on for a mile or something. It's all run by robots. Okay? Some guys come in, push a few buttons on the computer in the beginning, and the car is assembled. Okay? So you can use a lot of capital and very little labor. What's the best way to... How do you know what technology to use?
Well then, we've come into an agreement. We will hereby focus more on the automobile industry than, say, the bicycle industry. We should now focus on shifting resources from one industry to another. Go now and inform the local Soviets about this and... But sir! Yes, John. Which technology should we use? What do you mean? Should we do this like we did back in the day, where production happened individually in garages? Or should we use better available technology? Well, I'll be damned, John. That's a good question.
How do you know how many cars to produce?
But sir! Yes, John. How do you know how many cars to produce? We covered this. It is a part of the 5-year plan. The goal is 1 car per individual, and distribution starts from logistically prioritized regions. Wait, you mean to tell me it was planned?
Every single individual, do you see cars out there in the road that every single car that you see is the same colour or same type, same, model or whatnot? There's even some people who are driving about in Porsches because they can afford to do so. So you've got all these different cars, right? So you've got all the different options there. So you're going to have to work out production of how much to produce of every single colour for every single different make, and you've got to work out the production of all of those options for every single individual out there in society. So then the question would be this: how do you know how much to produce of each and every single option available there for a vast society of 70 million people that you're going to plan production for? Even if you were to run a survey, people don't exactly respond to surveys in such an honest manner. So you're not even going to get rational information from that. Not everybody likes driving about in these, wee cars. Some people love the minis. Other people love driving about in the big, petrol guzzlers, as I call them. You have those who, prefer the electric cars, and others who prefer not so much on the electric cars. They prefer, the old diesel motors, etc. How then do you know how much to produce for each and every single option available to provide for the needs and wants of the masses? Or are you telling me that what you would do is you would just neglect the masses and say, here's what you're given? And then it boils on to the knowledge problem that was argued by Friedrich A. von Hayek. The central planner doesn't know how to technologically improve. And if you want historical examples of that, look at British Rail. In the absence of the economic calculation problem, there was no possible way that the government could know how to technologically improve the British rail industry. That's why it had the outdated trains. That's why in Cuba, it's not a case of a fashion statement. They had the outdated cars. The government didn't know the information of what goes into producing cars and how to technologically advance them. It didn't have the information of profits and losses. Ford cars, and then you've got the hatchbacks, and you've got all the different kinds of Ford cars. So how do you know how much to produce of each and every single option possibly available? You don't know. You would then be left with an inefficient economy where you would end up misallocating valuable scarce resources into the wrong parts and creating surplus waste of what is not in demand, because you took away profits and losses. You take that resource and you allocate it. What would happen if you allocate it into a part of where consumers are not buying? And that was precisely the very reason why you saw the massive big long waiting lines of more than 3 pairs of shoes in the Soviet Union. Because what the government did was, it centrally planned production and it overproduced 3 pairs of shoes that consumers did not like the taste of. You take away the monetary based system and have a moneyless based economy, what are you left with? You've got no information of prices, so you don't know what to produce more of. You don't know, what resources to use or how much to produce or where to allocate the valuable scarce resources. So what ends up happening in their libertarian socialist utopia? Resource usage gets overused. You end up seeing resources being allocated into the wrong parts of the market. Most importantly, you end up seeing a problem where everything just looks the same. And if you want a prime example of that, here's socialism. That's because the central planner has no way of knowing the vast array of options out there on the market. It would be impossible for the central government to know how to produce for a vast array of things out there. Too complex. The government wouldn't know how to do it. And even if you had no government, etc., you'd still be faced with that problem because you don't have prices to tell you that information. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask me, comment in the comment section below. And of course, be sure to like the video, share the video, and of course, thank you for watching the video. And of course, I shall talk to you later. Cheers.